I had the good fortune of spending 10 years in prison, which might sound like quite a contradiction in terms. But considering I'm still here today and talking to you, most of my friends I went to school with and grew up on my council estate with, they're dead. Heroin overdoses, stabs over drugs, stabbings in prison, whatever. So I'm still here, which is pretty amazing. But first I want to just play you a short video which will kind of set the tone of what we're talking about here.
My parents don't understand. All the drinking and fighting means I'm scared. I'd like a cuddle, perhaps a bedtime story, but mostly I'd like them to stop shouting at me. And sometimes they hit me. Feeling scared every day and not feeling loved or wanted will change me for the rest of my life. Later, I'll have problems at school, problems with alcohol, and I'll get in trouble with the police. What's happening to me right now means I'm more likely to have serious health problems in middle age and die sooner than I should. Doctors say my life is full of adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs. But in my world, this means I see my dad hitting my mum. Dad's got a drinking problem, and mum's always crying, even with the tablets. I am always being shouted at and hit. After the booze and fags, there's not a lot of money for toys or clothes, or even food. I'm getting used to being scared all the time. Now I'm just angry. The doctors say things are changing inside me. My brain isn't learning how to control my feelings properly. My body can't relax like those kids who don't have ACEs, so my body won't be able to repair itself properly when I get older, making it more likely I'll get cancer or heart disease as an adult. It hurts when my parents hit me, but the real damage is hidden, and that damage will be with me for life.
I drink and smoke. They say I'm out of control, but I'm not. It's just my way of coping with my ACEs. I've been in plenty of fights, but what's wrong with that? Kids' punches don't hurt half as much as when my dad hits me. I beat up a kid last week at school because he looked at me weird. Who cares? I ended up with more time out of school. Learning's not for me anyway, and the teachers don't care any more than my parents. I don't like the way anyone looks at me except my girl. She's 16 and pregnant, just like my mum was with me.
So this is where I've ended up. I've got diabetes and cancer's probably on the way. I know these kill you, but I couldn't do without them. I've never had a proper job and I've spent time inside. I hate my kids. I hate their mum too, until she left, so my kids have grown up with ACEs. And now my daughter had her first kid. She's 16. The course of my life was set in the wrong direction a long time ago. I know where I'm heading, and sadly I know where my kids are heading too. This doesn't have to happen. A little help in childhood makes a big difference to where life takes you. When I was a baby, the nurses noticed that my mum wasn't coping and helped her and explained how important my childhood is to the rest of my life. So, with a bit of help, she coped. The police came round after next door complained about the noise from Mum and Dad fighting. They asked how I was feeling. I told them I was scared all the time. Mum and Dad got help. The shouting got better and the hitting stopped. I even got some bedtime stories. I still had problems at school, but the teacher asked me about what was happening at home. I got help controlling my feelings. It wasn't a lot, but it was enough. I'm now married with 2 children, and I've got a job. most of the time. I haven't repeated the same problems with my kids. We got help when being a parent got too much. Our children are ACE-free, and that means their kids stand a good chance of growing up ACE-free as well. Almost half the people in England and Wales experienced one ACE as a child, and 1 in 10 of us suffered 4 or more ACEs. If we stop ACEs, millions of children would not become smokers or binge drinkers, and levels of violence in adults would be cut in half. Fewer ACEs in childhood also means fewer adults developing diseases like cancer, heart disease and diabetes in middle age. We all need to be ACE aware. Are you? Doctors, police, nurses, teachers, firefighters and most importantly parents. The more you know about ACEs, the more you can help stop children growing up with ACEs in their lives. And for those of you who have already suffered ACEs, the more you know, the more you can help yourself and others who have suffered ACEs cope.
Right, that's that's really important, because so many of the friends I grew up with on the estate that I ended up living on near London had just multiple ACEs. They really, really did. And the ACEs itself comes from first slide, thank you. 1998, Felici et al. Their study was to determine the relationship between adverse childhood experiences and people becoming shortening their life by 20%, 20% less life, because of the way they were treated by the parents. They didn't get enough love, or parents were fighting each other, beating the kids, sexual abuse, a whole raft. These are the 10 ACEs, like it said on the video. Most of us have suffered one of these. 10% of people have suffered 4. I got 8. The only ones I didn't have, I think, was actually the jury's still out, mental illness and criminal behaviour. There was no criminals in my household, but the rest of them, I got them. So my parents, I think because they both came from, they were single children, and their parents were really like Victorian valued, Victorian principle. They were really strict. But this was also the 1960s. It was a permissive society. The hippies were freaking out, and everyone was getting high and weed and that. But they were living with these parents who just expected terrible things for them. So I think the reason they both just escaped their parents by marrying was because that was the best way to escape their parents. But my dad was gay. Not gay today, gay in the 1960s. That means you go to prison for being gay. So like many gay men in the 1960s, smokescreen, you marry a woman, you have some kids, deeply frustrated, turn to alcoholism, drug abuse, whatever it was. His chosen poison was alcohol. And he beat the crap out of all of us. I watched him throw a cast iron kettle down the hall at my mum. She went like protect her head and hit her ear and broke her ribs. And he was variously a hairdresser and a dog breeder. But he couldn't really hold down a job for that long because he was an alcoholic. So I just felt the dog lead all the time. Chain end, leather end, doesn't matter. Just beat it all the time. One day I watched him, I thought he was stealing from the gas meter, but he wasn't. It turned out he was borrowing money from the gas meter, which a lot of council estate working class people used to do. He left the house, I robbed the gas meter, hit the local shop and bought loads of sherbet. Blue, red, yellow sherbet. The playground was flooded with it. It was like my first experience of dealing with powders. And none of the teachers could understand where all this powder, all this sherbet came from. Then, after a few more years, before we left London when I was about 7 or 8. Somehow my mum got rid of him. Don't know how, but you know, he was around a lot less. But by then it was too late. I was damaged goods. I was in the school, I was fighting, I was always outside the headmaster's office. I did a rooftop protest. I wouldn't get off the roof of the school until my mum came and got me down. But because he wasn't around, my mum got a job. She sent us, there was like a school that we went to during the holidays, school holidays, because she had to keep working. So I went to this school, and this was my first foray into criminality, yeah? And it should have just turned me off for crime forevermore, because I left the school playground, went to this block of flats in London, and right by the bin sheds, there was all these other sheds and stuff, and I opened it, I found a bicycle, yeah? So I cycled back, I stole this bicycle, cycled back to the school and showed it off to my mates. And the teachers were like, hey, where did you get that bike? I went, oh, my mate, and I was just about to cycle off and get away. No, grabbed hold of me, took me in the office, left the bike leaning against the fence. A policeman drove or walked past and noticed his son's bicycle leaning against the fence. Which is stupid, eh? So they put me in the police station, phoned my mum up. She said, I can't come and get him until 5 when I finish work. So I'm just sitting there swinging my legs in this cell with the door left wide open. Anyway, then my mum was offered, the flats we lived in were kind of getting run down and stuff. They wanted to renovate them. So they said to her, right, you're going to move to Farnborough, yeah? 4-bedroom house with a garden from a first floor flat with a balcony. Now you can either come back to London when it's been renovated, or you can stay in the house. I think she was looking for a geographical cure for my problems, but too late. So we go to Farnborough. Another reason probably my dad wasn't around, because I think he was just died in the wall London, wanted to live in London full stop. So we were 30 miles out of London, new schools, again, just trouble. Fighting in the playground, outside the headmaster's office, getting caned all the time, getting beaten with slippers, you know, more trauma, of course. That's what I used to do back then. And then I started truant. I moved from junior school to secondary school, and I was truanting. I was working at the market. I was 12 years old. I was working at the market and earning money rather than going to school. Then one weekend, me and my friends destroyed all this machinery, construction machinery on a building site, smashed the windows, we threw these surveyor poles for the office and that, got arrested, trouble. Then, also my mother actually, she was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. Didn't know she'd be in a wheelchair in the next few years. So, the social services said that I'm going to be put in care, and that because they couldn't understand. They really couldn't understand the brain that I had, still got actually, don't know how, but they couldn't understand how clever I was, but there was all this trouble. And I was determined to self-sabotage. I mean, I know why now, but maybe they knew, but now there's systems in place which weren't around back then. So they put me in care. This is the way they sent me, Winston House. And in the night, you could hear the boys crying and screaming because they were being sexually abused. 12, 13, 14-year-old boys. I was so lucky to be violent because ain't no one going to sexually abuse me, and they didn't. So I kind of got away with that. But because we were just like degenerate, delinquent, we just used to run away all the time. And we ran away from this place, burgled the bus station and found a cash box with £300 in it. 1976, £100 each, 3 boys. That's like 500 quid each today, I guess. So we walked from Winchester train station to the nearest station, which is Shawford. There's no people there or anything. Jumped on the train, stayed there overnight, jumped on the train, went to Southampton, got a ferry to cross the Isle of Wight. And I remember this because we were on an open-top bus. Like, you know, we were on holiday and we had 100 quid each. And this open-top bus is going right the way across the Isle of Wight. And then, wow, look at that. There's 3 prisons over there. Because there's right near Newport, there's these Camp Hill prison and Albany, and there was 3 prisons. And we knew we were going there. It was written in the stars. We knew we were going there, and we knew that. We ended up in Yarmouth, Harbour Lights Cafe, loads of money. We just buying like all-day breakfast and getting her to change £20 notes. Why aren't you at school? Oh, our parents were in the pub. They'd just give us some money to come out. No, she called the police. They come and take us down to the police station, drop your pants, and there's all these notes fall out of her pants. Back to the school, run away again. Back to the school, run away, run. Then they put me next door to there because I just kept running away. They showed me this folder with yellow sheets and said, every one of these sheets is when you run away, we've got to fill these out. Put me in a new assessment centre. There, you know, the windows had blocks, sash windows. You could only open the windows that much. You couldn't really escape. Then they said to me, right, now we're going to send you to a place where you ain't going to want to run away. You're going to love it. Went to this school, Edwardian Mansion in Romsey, and they had 32 horses. They did camping trips with horses and tents and stuff like that. They had bricklaying courses, carpentry courses. So I picked up a little bit of guitar, and I was just like, yeah, I didn't want to run away. I did run away after 18 months because that's just me. Self-sabotage came back in, and then, actually, while I was there, I did 5 CSEs, which were like SATs or something like that, I guess. And I got the 2nd highest grade in technical drawing in Hampshire. 97%. It's like mad, isn't it? Because my brain was just so sharp. And this teacher, Mr. Hardman, I remember, a little bald-headed man, he just saw something in my brain and just went, right. And he just made sure that he taught me everything about technical drawing. And I could look at 2 dimensions, two views of something and tell you exactly what the 3rd side of it looked like and stuff. It's just like, wow, crazy brain. Anyway, ran away, more crime in London. This time, 15 years old, you can go to Borstal. Borstal's young boys' prison. 13 months first time, 17 months second time. I think, again, I was just such a control problem. I was always in trouble. I was in solitary confinement, which I kind of love solitary confinement because all I did really was just read. And I went from normal school where maybe you've got, secondary school, maybe you've got 12 lessons. You're doing physics, chemistry, English, maths, music, all that, geography, all history. Just went to 4 subjects when I went to care and Borstal and stuff. And so all the stuff that I didn't learn at school, I learned in the cell in Borstal. But when I first went there for the first 13 months, I was 15 and 16 years old, so I was still school age. Second time I went there, it was more like I got sitting guilds in welding and a sitting guilds in captain lathe setting and stuff, so there's a bit of training going on. But they gave me this job working outside, and they said this is a privilege, and it was just the worst job I did. I mean, I hadn't had many jobs, but it was awful. I was just tending their bowling green for the governor and the prison officers to play bowls every weekend. I said, this job's shit. Can't you give me a job change? He said, when did you get out? I said, December. This was in May. There you go, you can have a job change in December. Anyway, he adjusted the blades of this lawnmower, and I'm pushing it along, and it keeps getting stuck, and it's just, I've just wheeled it over to the cliff, and now the green bucket that caught the grass, and I threw that off the 300-foot cliff and watched it bounce all the way down, because I was working outside the prison, and I went, oh, that felt good. And then I picked up the lawnmower, 750 quid's worth of lawnmower back in 1978, and I just threw it off the cliff and watched it bounce all the way down. It was wonderful. And he came and he said, why aren't you working now? I said, I can't work, Governor, I ain't got a lawnmower. He said, what do you mean you ain't got? We said, what have you done with it? I said, I threw it off the cliff. It was brilliant. I threw it off the cliff. He said, don't be stupid. Where have you? I said, look, come here. Look at see all them green bits down there? That's your lawnmower. So that was my second term in Borstal. And again, it was just trouble. And then what happened then? In Borstal, actually, it was perfect timing, really, because the punk subculture came along then, punk rock, spitting, snarling, safety pins and bondage trousers. It was all about anarchy, nihilism, chaos. My hero was Sid Vicious. He was a heroin addict. He stabbed his girlfriend to death in the Chelsea Hotel in New York, went to prison, came out of prison and overdosed on heroin. So me and my friends were like, man, we ain't going to make it past 21, same as him. I was 60 in January. Didn't think I'd make it past 21. So the punk rock explosion really took off. That was in between the Borstals, actually. Came out, got involved in that, dressing like a punk and all that stuff. Back to Borstal again, came back out. That was in 1982, I guess I got out of there then. Then 2 years later, actually, what we got, oh yeah, that's the sexual abuse thing. I mean, you can read all of that, I'll leave that for a minute, but the main thing it says at the bottom is the claims include damage for actual assaults, this is in the sexually abused boys in my school, for psychiatric injuries later in life and loss of earnings. These people were so messed up, they couldn't even work. And this is what the authorities did. They sent them to this place, and this wasn't just this school. This Operation Grangerwood, I was in Brighton and I was on bail, right? And I was on for some minor crime in about 2001 and 2. And I had to report to the police station after work, twice a week, I think it was, to make sure I hadn't run away. And I walked in there and I told him my name and he's going to sign my name. And there were these 2 suits, there's a glass window, like, typical custody suite. And there were 2 guys in suits at the back and he went, here he is. And I was like that. And they went, no, don't run. It's okay. And they questioned me about this. You were in Winton House in 1978 and some allegations have come along and stuff. So yeah, not good at all, not good. But like I say, being violent is what saved me. Then, next subculture comes along, Stonehenge 84. I turn up and there's all these hippies living in buses and trucks and smoking weed. And I spent the whole month doing LSD and magic mushrooms and smoking weed and cocaine and all these wonderful drugs. Because just before that, I'd got into drugs because when I was a punk rocker, I was sniffing glue and solvents. Me and all my mates. We just just trying to block everything out and just searching for oblivion, basically. And my sister said to me, she said, man, Christian, why are you sniffing glue all the time for? Why don't you just go and smoke weed like Bob and Ellen? I said, who are they? And she went, oh, they live over there. I knocked on their door. I said, well, my sister reckons I should smoke weed with you rather than sniffing glue. Come in. Within 12 months, I'd gone from sniffing glue to smoking weed to barbiturates, LSD, magic mushrooms, crack cocaine and injecting heroin. Thanks, sister. I mean, it was going to happen anyway. If it hadn't been that house, it would have been another house somewhere. It was, even in Borstal, I was reading all these counterculture books and stuff. And it would say LSD, and I go, oh, encyclopedia, what's LSD? Cocaine, what's cocaine? What's cocaine? And I was just studying the drugs I was destined to end up taking. So yeah, so I end up here. I spend a month doing LSD. and just getting off my face, which was great because I was learning to play music and guitars and stuff. Because when I was in Borstal, I found this little red book called The Rudiments and Theory of Music. So I taught myself to read music without any musical instrument. Taught myself the lines, the spaces, the staves, right up to cadences, and just thought I won't need that. And then after this, well, I started learning to strum guitar, but then later on I was actually finger picking and learned reading from classical music from sheet music. But yeah, this happened, and suddenly I realised that the dog-eat-dog world that I came from, in the care homes, the Borstals, the council estate I grew up in, which it was all about who was the toughest and being able to look after yourself and take care of yourself. And then this lot come along, and I'm just like, wow, man, look at this. There's a whole new world out here. They were at peace, getting high, playing music, watching live bands. It's like, wow, this is cool. So yeah. Then the year after that, actually, put my glasses on, that was wonderful. It was utopia. It was like halcyon days. And then suddenly it wasn't so good. Because, oh yeah, that video, if you want to watch it, it's just called Aces Wales, yeah? Simple as that. Aces Wales. If you want to show that to anyone, we'll share it with other people. Then we have, right, this is called a battle. It wasn't a battle, it was an ambush. I'm not going to play all of it, but most people today have never heard of this. Oh, come on. That's it. Huh? Oh, yeah. Dan. Now, why is it doing that? Come on, go away. Maybe that'll do it. No. PowerPoint slideshow, yeah, get rid of that. Why won't it go away? Doesn't make sense. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, so people your generation, and even yours, Evelyn, you're a little bit older than these students, I'm sure. They never heard of this. So I'm just going to give you it's 8 minutes long. I'm not going to play all of it because that's going to cut into my talk too much. But this, just when I found peace and love and happiness and everything, the following year, because Stonehenge 1984, there were signs everywhere. Price lists of cocaine, LSD, magic mushrooms, red lead, all the different types of hash. And there were just signs. It was like a supermarket with signs up of how much everything was and come and buy our drugs from here and that. And one day, I remember I was off my face, but I just saw these two policemen walking around. And I was like, because prior to that, it was like a police no-go zone. The police weren't even allowed on site. And then suddenly, someone had allowed these two police, white shirts with pips on their shoulders, to have a walk around. And I was like, that's such a bad idea. And then, no surprise, the next year they said, there ain't going to be no Stonehenge 85. And we all said, yeah, there is, go for it. And this is basically.
The convoy of 150 trucks, coaches and caravans moved off shortly after midday to drive to Stonehenge in defiance of the law. They were 400, mostly men. On their 10-mile journey, they were observed from the air. Then the first roadblock. The holidaying public, now hopelessly caught up, turned round. The convoy came to a standstill at another block, then turned across the fields. They cut down fencing in preparation for the violent confrontation that followed, in which many arrests had been made. Windscreens were smashed and unlit petrol bombs were hurled. Police reinforcements have now been called out, but Stonehenge has remained closed to the public.
On the floor. All right. Down. Oi! Put that man down. 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 On the floor. Hey, leave it out. Over. Over. On your face. All right. If you don't hit me. All right. Come on in. Calm down. Just calm down. Go away. Right. No! Don't know.
See what they're doing to us!
What we've witnessed in the last half an hour here has been surely some of the most brutal action by police forces in Britain for a long time. Whatever the causes, the end product seemed to be just hitting out wildly by the police, with babies in those trucks and in those buses, and young women with those babies in their arms were hit as well. At one stage, one of the cameramen from Fleet Street was arrested for being on this site. We were pushed and shoved to one side, but the worst of it all was that the people in those coaches who were trying to escape from the police were just grabbed, their windows were smashed, and they themselves were beaten, sometimes senselessly, on the floor. And this is not over yet. They tend to carry on with their campaign around here for another day yet. But whether they'll survive after what's happened at the hands of the police today, we'll have to see. Kim Sabito, ITN.
Sorry, I mean, there's 8 minutes of it, I'm not going to play it all. But yeah, I was there that day, and then, you know, it all went from Stonehenge 84, peace and love and guitar playing and everything, all happiness and stuff. And then I just watched my friends, all their houses get smashed. Babies lying in their cots with broken glass, because you saw the police just smashing, that's people's homes. So the next altercation I had with a police officer a month after that happened, I beat the hell out of him. And it was just all the anger of that, and I was violent anyway. But just when I discovered, I just started becoming non-violent, and then I watched this, and I became violent again. And the violence in prison was necessary, because if you're not violent, if you can't be violent in prison, you become a victim, same as you do in the care homes. So you know, violence served me pretty well, really. And the funny thing was, when, like I said about the care system, we drove past those prisons, and we knew we were going to prison. And when I got to prison, I was already in a hierarchy, because the people I knew from the care homes that had already gone to prison were there already, and they knew who I was, so I didn't have to fight to find a position in a hierarchy. I already had it. So, after that, yeah, policemen, stealing cars, credit card fraud, 3 years in prison, down to Dartmoor, worst prison in England, or the south of England anyway, in Devon, miles away in Devon. So I did 30 months in Dartmoor, and after that I was released. That was my first experience of playing saxophone, actually. I joined a brass band in Dartmoor, but it was a brass band. So there was a saxophone in the bottom of the cupboard, and I said, "Let me play that, mate." He said, "This is a brass band. We don't play saxophones." I said, "Well, look, so that could save someone. That could like, be someone's life and then take them away from a life of crime or whatever." I said, and he said, no, you can't. I said, "I've never heard such a narrow-minded attitude in all my life." He said, "Tell you what, you can take that to your cell and learn to play it if you play the E-flat bass, which is like a small tuba, in my band." So I did. Started making some squawking, horrible noises with the saxophone, which I'm sure my neighbours weren't that happy about. But again, I got in trouble with something or other, went to solitary confinement, came back, and the saxophone was gone. But that gave me a taste of saxophone. After Dartmoor, just more and more prison. Coldingley prison, Campill prison, Leeds prison, all different prisons. And that just continued. 1990, I had a son with my wife at the time, my partner at the time. I'd never been married. We had a son, but we were involved in loads of credit card fraud at the time. We were going to Waitrose supermarkets. We were getting all the stuff that's easy to sell: nappies, baby wipes, booze, 30 quid cash back. Then go to the cigarette counter, 400 cigarettes, £30 cash back. So I'd do that. My partner would do that. We'd leave the shop with the equivalent of about 300 quid. Hit 2 or 3 shops on the way to London. Get to London, we've got nearly £1,000. Buy loads of heroin and go home. Did that for 18 months. Now, I didn't think I went to Kingston Crown Court, and I'd already spoken to my partner. I just said, "Listen, worst I'm going to get is 18 months. Or I can just," because I'd already actually, for 6 months, been to the south of France just on a guitar trip, just busking in the south of France, playing the cafes, the terraces, meeting all these French people, learning how to speak French and everything. It was great. So when I returned, I met this girl, and I said, "Or I don't go to court and I just go back to France." And she said, "What's the worst that can happen?" I said, "Worst that can happen is 18 months. Got in the court, and I was just like, do you know what? I ain't got a good feeling about this. And I tried to leave, and they wouldn't let me. I got 4 years. My wife, partner, got 6 months, first offence. Never been in trouble in her life. Gave her 6 months because they were so angry that we'd stolen so much money, basically. That was that was Coldingley. So I went to Coldingley prison then. I started in Camp Hill, but there was a transaction with heroin. What they do is in prison, when you're locked up at night, you can swing a line. You just make it a long line out of sheets or whatever, and you just, if you want to pass drugs around from up there, someone will pass a line down and you send it up, or you can swing a line to the windows next door. The whole one side of the block is like a grid of windows, and you can get anything from there right over to there with everyone else's help. Someone exchanged this little bag of heroin with pepper. Now, had that have been me, there's no way I would have sat in a 6-man cell with my back to the open door. I'd have sat facing the door, knowing that something might happen. Anyway, I'm eating my cornflakes in the morning. Suddenly, my cornflakes are covered in blood. Been whacked on the head with a metal bed leg, got 13 stitches in my head. It wasn't, and then when I was in, they put me in solitary confinement because they said, we know what you're like. You're not going back into the general population because there's going to be a war. You're going to take your revenge or whatever. I said, no, honestly, I'm not. Honest. They wouldn't let me back up. So this guy knocked on my window. He was like rustling leaves. I was brushing up leaves. And he was like, oh man, I'm really sorry about that. We know now it wasn't you. Oh, thanks, mate. But by then, I was being moved to a different prison, which was Coldingley Prison, which is 20 minutes away from where I live in Farnborough, in Woking. Brilliant. So the visits got better. While I was in there was a teacher teaching guitar and stuff. So we, every week I used to go and learn guitar, but I could play. She kind of played folky music, you know, and I was playing Iggy Pop, Lust for Life and stuff like that. So there'd be a small group of people around the teacher, this lovely blonde lady. She's teaching all this folky stuff, and there'd be a bigger group around me going, how do you play Lust for Life? And it was great, but then there was a suggestion there was going to be a concert. So this was my first ever concert. And this is what I mean about maintaining a vision of the future. I learned how to read music. I was always into music. I was always just drumming along on my legs or whatever, and just so into music. And I realised that once I started playing guitar and that, I just wanted to become a live musician. I wanted to be able to perform, play concerts and gigs and stuff like that. So there was a concert in Coldingley. We rehearsed, and had a concert in the gym. And that went really well. So then there was an open day, which was great for everyone because that meant your families could actually come into the fields, and they had a big curtain-sided truck with speakers on the end of it, and it was like a proper concert. But the best thing was, it meant it was a really good opportunity to exchange drugs. All your family would come in and hand out loads of drugs to you. But that concert went really, really well as well. And there was a guy there he had a saxophone actually, and he said to me, you're a musician, aren't you? Can you teach me how to play my saxophone? And I was like, well, I don't know how to play a saxophone. So I got his saxophone, I got his little book that came with it, and I played a little bit, obviously, and I started learning it, and I'd teach him the next day or a couple of days later, learn a bit more, So that's where I really, really fell in love with the saxophone. And then I noticed one of my friends later on outside, he was surrounded by girls because he played the saxophone. And I was like, I want to play saxophone. But I was released from Coldingley, and I remember every night I was walking past this shop and there was a saxophone in the window, and I was like, I was thinking of smashing the window and grabbing the saxophone, yeah? And then I just thought, are you stupid or what? Why don't you just go in there, pay a deposit, and then over the next few weeks, pay it off until you got, and that's what I did, and I got a saxophone without smashing the window and running down the street with a saxophone in my hand. Idiot. But yeah, so then I got the blues scale and on the guitar, wrote the notes down, got the saxophone, and I just taught myself to play saxophone for a couple of years. But all the while, there was just still heroin, and then crack cocaine as well, actually, in that time. It was about 6 months of crack cocaine. And again, I was arrested. I'd been stealing chainsaws and all kinds of stuff from B&Qs and garden centres, big lawnmowers worth £300, just acquisitive crime, just to feed my habit. Back in prison again. Now, I'd applied to a rehabilitation centre called Alpha House once before that, and I'd written them a letter and said, I want to come and I want to be in your rehab. And they wrote back and they said, well, actually, we feel that you're just trying to avoid a custodial sentence. And I was like, dang, they knew. This time, I was back in prison thinking I'm going to get another 3 or 4 years. I wrote them another letter. And they wrote back and they said, you know what? You sound like you might be ready. Because what I actually did, and I told my friends Nicky and Russ last night, and they were like, what, really? I asked the prison officers, because I was in a shared cell with 2 other guys and we were doing heroin. They'd send a dog in to find the heroin, but they never could. They just knew we were using it. And I said to the prison officers, can I have a single cell? And they said, what do you want that for? I said, because I want to give up the heroin. So I ended up, they put me in a single cell, and I'd look after my friend's heroin overnight, just in case they got busted, because the prison officers knew I wasn't on heroin. And they'd give me some cannabis so I could just smoke a few spliffs and not smoke the heroin. So I'd look after their heroin all night, because, and it was only weeks before that when I first been imprisoned on that occasion, the final occasion, it took me 17 days and nights to get 1 hour's sleep. Because, you know, when you're on heroin, it's just like, you know, you're almost in a coma all the time, you know, and then when you get off it, suddenly, bang, you're wide awake. And I was so tired, I'd get undressed and get in bed, and then my brain would be going like 5 trains of thought all going at once, so I couldn't sleep for 17 days and nights, 1 hour's sleep. Then I asked for a single cell, I get that. Long story short, I go to court, and I'm already off the heroin. The rehab come and interview me, and they said, yeah, you're ready. This guy, Charlie Fuggle, I'll never forget him. He was an ex-junkie, he was a junkie in the 60s. And he became a member of staff at Alpha House. And he came and visited me in the prison and interviewed me and said, yeah, man, you're ready. I can tell, you're ready. Judge said to me, right, 2 years probation with a condition of residence. If you leave that place before they say you're ready, you're going to be back in front of me or one of my colleagues getting another 4-year prison sentence. 3, 4, 5 years. And I was like, I'd had enough at that point. I'd had enough. On one occasion, the last time in Coldingley prison it was, I went out on home leave, and me and my friend from the same hometown, who was both at the end of this landing, we were opposite each other so we could have our backs to the wall if we had to fight together. I went on my home leave, we borrowed some drugs, we owed people money. I actually came back from my home leave late and lost the privilege of all future home leaves just because I made sure I went back with the drugs so that me and my mate wasn't on his own and got stabbed or anything. He went on his home leave, he didn't come back. I've got 4 people in my cell with knives ready to cut me. I'm like, wow, well, you know I'm good for visits. You know you're going to get everything back. You know what Barry's done. Barry, my mate. Where's Barry? I don't know either. So, round about then, because probably late 80s, early 90s, heroin was suddenly everywhere in the prisons. Before that, prison was a cure for me. My veins would heal up. There'd be no heroin to have and I'd get really healthy. Prison food was okay. My veins would heal. And then late 80s, early 90s, suddenly heroin's everywhere. So now I've got no escape from heroin. So that was one of the main drivers that made me think about going to rehab. The other was my 3 children I had by then, because I'd had some twins in the meantime. So I'm looking at my 8-year-old son, my 18-month-old baby twins, and the fact that there's heroin everywhere in the prison system now, and also that, you know, I'm probably going to die in prison over a drug deal or something like that and get stabbed. So the rehab accepted me. Great stuff. I did get drunk on the way there, which I shouldn't have done really, but when you've been in prison for months and then they release you and you've got some money in your pocket, you just go to the pub, don't you? But they said, yeah, you know, there's people here with alcohol problems. You shouldn't be here drunk, because they breathalyzed me. Yeah, that'd be wrong. But also, when I was in Coldingley prison, let's get rid of that. To help pay for my heroin, I actually, I took it to drawing. Arthur Rackham copies. I was just copying drawings and selling them for 50, 60 pounds, which was quite a good deal, really. There's a guy in Hazelmere somewhere, white-collar criminal, and I just had this book, and he'd choose these drawings by Arthur Rackham, who's like, did lots of fairy tale stuff, personification of trees. He did a lot of artwork around Alice in Wonderland, Tristan and Isolde, Peter Pan in Kensington Gardens. Really, really magical fairy pictures. So I'd be doing these copies and he'd be paying me 50, 60 pounds for a painting. So I sold all my artwork. I haven't got any of it, apart from one thing. Look at that. That took me a year. 70 hours on a pencil, 70 hours drawing time, and it took me 1 year. And I've actually still got that at home today. All the other stuff, long gone. Gone, gone, gone. So rehab, oh my God. That was harsh. You know, I just wanted to leave all the time. And it took me 4 months, about 3 or 4 months before I broke down crying, because everything was just stacked inside of me and it just took so long for them, because they've got lots of people there, they're only 21, 22 years old. And they've got a load of trauma, sure, but they haven't had so many years of just suppressing it and keeping it. So it took months and months and months before they break you down to a blank piece of paper and then rewrite you, which was great. That's what they eventually did, but it took months before they could even start working on me because I was so messed up with all these 8 aces or whatever. So 9 months I was in there, 9 months, and it's supposed to be the hardest rehab in the country, actually. Alpha House, it's called. I've returned there recently. It's not a rehab anymore. There was some security guys. It was all closed, and it's a shame because I really wanted to find my counsellor and tell him that I'd made it to Cambridge University because I think he'd be really happy about that, wouldn't he? So anyway, rehab. Came out of rehab, and I moved to Winchester, which was where that school was actually. So I knew Winchester. They were trying to send me to Portsmouth and Southampton. And I said, "Are you mad? There's loads of drugs down there. It's all like, you know, I'm going to end up on some council estate or whatever." And they said, "Yeah, but there's drugs in Winchester too." I said, "Yeah, but Winchester's a lot more affluent than Southampton and Portsmouth, and that means there's going to be better policing, and that means the drugs are going to be a little bit more undercover there than it would be in council estates in Southampton and Portsmouth." And I was right. So I moved to Winchester, and I didn't know anybody. Started again. Actually, I got a job before I actually left the rehab because you leave the main house of the rehab and then you go to a lodge at the end of the drive, and then you can start reintegrating with the community from the lodge. And I was cycling 12 miles in the morning, working on a building site for 8 hours, and then cycling 12 miles back in the evening for about 3 weeks until a place came up to live on the building site. And by then I'd started making some friends. I mean, my first day on this building site, I say, "Yeah, go over there and work with that guy, digging a hole or whatever I was doing, you know, it's like groundworks." And we start chatting. "Yeah, mate, what do you do?" "Oh, I play saxophone." "Really? So do I." So I met him. He was in a band, so I started following his band and became their roadie and learning all the tricks about the amplifiers and how to be a musician and working musician and stuff. And I stayed there for about 3 years, but then the sax player guy, Tim, he'd moved to Brighton, and me and my girl at the time went down there and visited him quite a lot, and I realised that actually, if I stayed in Winchester, then the standard of music I was going to learn there was nowhere near as good as Brighton. If I went to Brighton, it's just next level. So I went there. He formed another band, and I drove them around a lot. And again, then I went to Jazz College in Chichester, which is where I live now. 2 years Jazz College. They just form bands, you know, saxophone, trumpet, bass player, and everything else. And they put people with different levels of proficiency, but put them all in the same band. So you might have a really good sax player with a novice bassist, but yeah, and it was just like 2 years of just playing music, man. I think the first year it cost me 120 quid for a whole year. It was crazy. And the second time, I think I got it free because I'd broken my leg. So for some reason I was on dole money or whatever because I couldn't work, and then that meant I could do the course free the second time around. It's about $6,000 a year now, obviously. It's gone right up. But yeah, that was just like, wow, it's insane. So 2 years of this, and then I get the chance to join a band. So I left college because that's the only reason I was in college, really, wasn't it? Was to start playing music and join a band. And then I was with this band for 15 years. Now, if you go onto my, you know the email invitation you all got? If you go onto there, then that can take you to my website, and then from my website you can go to my YouTube channel, my Facebook, Instagram, all that kind of stuff. And my YouTube channel, there's music on there of me and my band, as well as some solo stuff that I've done. But 15 years with the band, we played Glastonbury twice. 2 different stages at Glastonbury. And it's just kind of mad because, you know, you look at my life, right, and it's like I said at the beginning, I had the good fortune of spending 10 years in prison. And it's just, had my life not turned out the way it did, I'd probably have 2 cats and a wife and a Mercedes car and a 5-bedroom house in Sandhurst today. And I'd be wearing a tie today. But it's just kind of mad because it feels like I've lived like 3 lives. I've been to 17 different countries. I speak pretty good French, Italian, a little bit of Georgian, and it's just mad. I look at other people's lives, and I just can't believe how much I've actually got up to since leaving rehab and just making up for lost time, I guess. Travelling, busking all over the place. You know, that's the reason I've been to so many countries. It's just like crossing borders, going around, playing saxophone, guitar, meeting other musicians, moving around Europe. It's fantastic. So, the construction continued. I kept working in construction, and I guess I moved to Brighton around about 2001 or 2. Yeah. And it was a couple of years after that I joined the band. But while I was in Brighton, I worked my way up from just being a ground worker to this company said you work, just before the financial crash actually, this was like 2007, 8. They could see something was happening. All these housing estates, construction housing was all going into mothballs. They were closing down sites. The diggers, the forklift, the dumpers, everything was going back to the yards and not going back out. They could knew something was bad was going to happen with the money. And they said to me, do you want a job as a general foreman? And then we'll train you to be a manager and all that stuff. We'll give you a company car, a pension, a family health care plan and all that sort of stuff, and a diesel card. And I was like, what's not to like? I'll have some of that. So I did. They managed to stay fluid for about 4 years after the crash, before going bust, being bought out by a French company, at which point I was made redundant. Now, my partner at the time, she just finished a university degree doing social sciences or something, and she ended up working with Alzheimer's and dementia with the over 65 team in Wales, in Newport, where she lived. And that got me thinking. I didn't want to go back to construction because I don't like working indoors. Probably because of the prison years. That's why I don't want to be an academic, stuck here all day. I didn't really like working in the offices within the construction industry. And now I just drive a machine on the building site and I'm outdoors all day, which is great now because the weather's starting to get better. Winter's a bit harsh, but hey. So I made redundant and I decided, right, maybe I should apply for university. But I didn't have enough UCAS points. And it's all about UCAS points, right? So 2 days ago, actually, I visited my course leader and his girlfriend in Cardiff. And it was just fantastic to see them both because he gave me an audition and said, it doesn't matter about UCAS points. You're a musician. What can you do? He played Watermelon Man on the piano and I played along on the saxophone and he went, you're in. Just like that. And the maddest thing about that was that, and there's so many crazy confluences in my life story. It's just insane because next door to the Atrium, which is my campus where I was doing the music degree, a BA in popular music, next door was Cardiff Prison. So I'm walking up and down this glass wall, three floors, loads of flights of stairs, with a glass wall looking into my old world. Over the walls of the prison, I can see everything that's going on, and there's the laundry trolleys, and there's the guys with the wheelbarrows, and there's the prison officers, and the prisoners all being let through gates and everything. It was mad. So then the third year, I had to do work experience. So I hadn't told my course leader about my life prior to that, because he might not have let me into the university. So I said to him, Rob, has there been any interaction between this university and the prison next door? He said, well, I've been here 10 years, not that I know of. I said, right, I'm just going to tell you briefly about my life a little bit, yeah? So I told him. I said, I want to go in there and teach prisoners how to play music. He said, brilliant idea. Do it. Do that. So got in touch with the course leader, the head of the learning department. We had an interview. I went in there, she showed me the classroom and everything else, and these guys teach learning music, and I helped someone play a bit of guitar, and so she said, right, and you've got to make an application to the Home Office whether they'll let you in prisons or not. So I did that, and it's really difficult to get access to prisoners. Take it from me, it's really difficult. I mean, Ben Crew, I could have killed him. I could have strangled him. I think I sent, when this is back in Cambridge, getting me access to HMP ISIS in London, he must have sent that form back to me for revision about 10, 15 times because he's that thorough. But anyway, the one I did for Cardiff, obviously I didn't have a clue about how difficult it was, so I probably just lackadaisically filled it in and said, yeah, I want to do a bit of this. And they said, no. And I was like, oh, great, there goes my research. But the programme that was going into Cardiff University and doing the music for these prisoners was called Changing Tunes out of Bristol. They also did post-release with these musicians, with these prisoners. So they'd have gigs in their church in Bristol with the ex-prisoners who've now been released. So I went and saw one of their gigs and interviewed some people. And, oh, my research, thank God for that, I got some research done. While I was, and this is another one of those crazy coincidences, while I was reading for my dissertation, and you know what it's like, paper after paper after paper, you want to die, don't you? Reading more papers. But then this one paper I read was called Fuck It, Matza and the Desistance Process. And Serena Wright, I've heard, was just so pleased that she could write a paper where she could say fuck it, fuck it, fuck it so many times. It's funny. But this paper, at the bottom there was an email. And it's the only paper that I responded to, and it just said RA something 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 at cam.at.uk, which I had no understanding what that even meant. I emailed this girl, Ruth Armstrong, and she'd been part of one of the authors of the paper, and said, I'm doing music programs in prisons dissertation, da 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 da. And then she wrote me back and she said, Wow, that's mad. So one of my students is also doing that. She sings with King's College Choir here at Cambridge, and she's taking small choirs into prisons, HMP, Whitemoor and Grendon. And we're having a symposium next month called the Subversive Good. Why don't you come along? And I was like, why not? Cambridge, what the hell? So I went to this symposium, walked into the room. The choir at the back of the room just stood up and sang a cappella. I just closed my eyes and it was in heaven. It was beautiful. Then there was a talk, and she was talking about her research, and there was a question and answer at the end. And then finally, before I left, I said to Ruth, can I grab 5-10 minutes of your time before I drive back to Wales? Because it's a 3-hour drive. She said, you see all these people? They all want some of my time. I've got to go and get my daughter from school. Here's my address. She said, what's the girl's name? The girl who's doing the choirs now, she said, she'll show you around Queen's College, Trinity, and will give you the guided tour for an hour, then come to my house, which I did. Went to her house, she made me dinner, I'm playing tiddlywinks with her 4-year-old daughter. And she said, tell me your life story, tell me your life, which I did. Then her husband came back with their older son, and we had dinner. And she said to me, do well at your degree, and then apply to come here and I'll be your supervisor. I said, what? So that's what she suggested, and that's exactly what I did. I got best dissertation of 2015-16, best business project of 2015-16 at Cardiff University. I got a 2-1 instead of a first, but you know, I'm not the kind of guy that gets a first. Same in Cambridge, it wasn't. So then, I'm applying to Cambridge University. I get a 2-1 with my undergrad degree, with the prizes. Then, I apply to Cambridge, and oh my God, what a process. It takes months of always online box ticking stuff and everything, but I got in there. And the funny thing is, someone must have looked at my picture and just said, he ain't going to fit in Trinity or King's. Let's put him in Darwin. Darwin College is an international college, yeah? So it's all international students. They had no understanding of the British class system, and couldn't tell from my accent that I come from some pre-gentrification ghetto in southwest London. Brilliant. And that really worked in my favour, because I'm not sure how I'd have got on in one of those more traditional colleges with loads of children of MPs and all that sort of stuff. But you know, Darwin was brilliant, and it's a really popular college. So I went into prisons, HM Prison ISIS, next door to Belmarsh in London, and my research was music programs in prisons. And you know Loic Vacant and Michel Alexander? You guys know that, students? Punishing the Poor, the new Jim Crow. It's the same in London. They're all blacks. But they're all singing the music, and there's some musicians going in there and playing some keyboards and recording a bit of bass and everything. I've got my dreads on my head, the feds on my legs and all this stuff. But they're singing, they're in gangs in prison. Can't wait to get back out into the gangs back in London, and they're singing about drugs and hoes and beamers and all this. And I'm just like, this ain't rehabilitation. So the people on this chain, what were they called? The music program, I can't remember the name of the program now even, but they were just saying, wow, this is great, you're going to do a dissertation, you're going to write about our program and everything else, we're going to put some of your stuff on some of your dissertation on our website. They never did in the end, because I basically just said, this ain't going to help anyone. Not through their fault, but these guys, because it took me till I was 35 years old to decide I'd had enough. And you know the age crime curve, you know, you get in trouble at 15, late teens or whatever, and then today's prisoner is more likely to be tomorrow's father than tomorrow's lifer. You know? By 22, 23, they've met a girl, they've got a baby, they've got a job. But that's also what the paper that I read was about. And then what was so amazing about it, MATSA and the desistance process. Wow, what's going on there? That's the paper there. You should really ought to read it. It's great. And what it's about is before you go to prison, you've got stakes in conformity, like I was just talking about. You've got a child, you've got a baby, you've got a wife, you've got a job, you've got a car. You don't want to lose all that, so you try and stay out of trouble, yeah? Because you know you're going to go to prison, you're going to lose it all. You go to prison, you lose it all, then you do your time, then you're released with a week's money in your back pocket, and you're expected to go straight. And people try, you know, like I said, I always said I don't want to go, I can't wait to get out and have no heroin, and my mates would be going, I can't wait to get out and get stoned. And I was just like, you're mad, I want to go straight. And the prison officers go, bye, see you next week, every time. And yeah, that was the thing. So after weeks or months of training and trying not to trying not to go back into the life of crime, they just go, fuck it. Back to being a burglar, drug dealer, shoplifter, whatever their actual criminal activity is. And that was an amazing paper, and that's what that paper was all about. And it's just because I emailed Ruth Armstrong with that paper that I ended up at Cambridge University. And then when I finished my degree, oh my God, that was a good feeling. And then got a mark, I passed, hadn't failed. I thought, you don't go to Cambridge and fail, do you? I hope not. Then they'd lent me £3,000 to get through because I ended up with not enough money and stuff. And so then I just said to the head of the catering department, can I get a job? So I ended up serving food to all the PhDs and all my compatriots in Darwin College. And they were going, what are you doing? You got a master's in criminology from Cambridge University. You're serving me food. I was like, yeah, man, it's cool. I love Darwin College Bar. I love the bar. I love being here. And I always knew that, you know, if you do it, 4 years is too long, I think, to be at Darwin. 1 year is not enough, but somewhere in the middle was okay. So yeah, I was there 8 months serving food. And then my friend offered me an opportunity to go and live in Georgia. Because I used to put up marquees at festivals as well, play music, put up marquees, and I met this pizza guy selling pizzas. I ended up working for him, so I'd get paid to put the marquee up and look after it all weekend, which, you know, you put it up, that's work, you take it down on a Monday, that's work, but everything in between is just making sure the ropes are tight. And work with the pizza man and make double money. He bought a Russian school bus, 1950s Russian school bus, and wanted to convert it into a pizzeria in Georgia. I said, count me in. So I left Darwin, crossed the Black Sea, and lived in Tbilisi for 8 months until the pandemic. So the pizza business was a flop. So anyway, so I started playing saxophone and guitar and singing, and I found another musician, and we were just starting to do gigs and getting some nice money together and stuff, and then the pandemic came along. And the builder over there, which is my default go-to really, gets £15 a day. It's £1 for a pint of beer and £1 for a packet of cigarettes, sure, but I didn't want to be earning £15 a day and end up on their money, because when I was working out there, I was kind of earning Western money, which goes a lot further. Anyway, so yeah, my friends from a festival scene phoned me up and said, you need to come and live here if you're leaving Georgia, because you need to write your book. So I went to their place, which is outside, in a place called Dugière, which is outside of Toulouse in southwest France, outdoor swimming pool. I was living in the guest house, 5 bedrooms, and one of the rooms is mine. This whole guest house is mine with an open fireplace at the bottom. And I just wrote 250 pages of my life story, which I'm on about 350 pages now, I think, and I've only written 30 years. But I do realise now, because I'm looking at what I've written, and I'm going to have to cut out a load of that because it's just too much. So the next 30 years I'm going to write, I'm not going to put in so much detail because I know that I'm going to have to pull it all out later on anyway. So, let's have a look. That's what I'm doing now. I drive one of these. It's like being an action man every day. And I'm on a building site, and honestly, some of those people, without being mean or whatever, they're not the brightest people on the planet. And a lot of them, they're violent and angry. And I watched them watching YouTube video the other day, and it's like, you need to be dangerous. And I was like, what the hell's he watching? So yeah, I'm in that cab driving that, and I don't have much to do with them really, which is really cool. Now I earn more money doing this than I'll ever get in academia. And I could probably earn a little bit more money being a manager with a lot more responsibility, which I don't want. So I'm just driving one of these, and that's me at a Russian mansion 2 years ago. I was there for a year. He wasn't sanctioned, by the way, because he's friends with Boris and co. And then, again, that's me at the same mansion, moving they're like a 100-year-old set of gates. They actually called me back to do that because they didn't trust any other forklift drivers, because there was only a 4-inch clearance at the top of those gates, and I had to take them off and move them out of the way. And then last Thursday, this guy, the bricklayer, said to me, you haven't got a jack, have you? Because I've got a puncture. I said, no, but I've got a telehandler. They're called a telescopic handler. So I just picked his car up with the forklift so he could change his tyre. So that brings us up to today, really. And what else am I doing, actually? It's mad, because after Cambridge, I just thought, what do you do after Cambridge? What's next? I don't want to do criminology. I don't want to go into prisons. I don't want to be a drug counsellor or any of that. I'll help people when my book's published and giving talks and stuff like that, but I can't go back to prison. There's a 60% reoffending rate in prison. Drug addiction, 90% failure rate. Why would you do that to yourself? I want to be happy now. So I decided to do this. So now I've been learning to speak Chinese for 2 years. Spent £2,000, got about 3 or 4 different teachers. I've got 2 teachers at the moment, one on a Saturday, one on a Sunday. And all day long, driving around in my machine, I just listen to Chinese Mandarin podcasts and learn bloody Chinese. So I want to go over there, end of this summer I think, I'll have enough money to go over there. I think I can get a 30-day visa if I just apply for a visa tomorrow. But if I'm invited by someone who runs their own business in China, then I can get a 90-day visa, which I want. If you're going to go that far, I want to be there for a few months. So my plan is turn up to go to China, finish writing my book, and then come back with a finished product and send it off to publishing houses. Now this is the book cover I'd like. From Dartmoor to Darwin, Footnotes of a Survivor, Christian Austin. That's me. And that picture, again, it's, as it says, you know, it's like the cover shows Aeneas carrying his father and she's out of burning Troy. But there's also this story in this. It's not in the Bible. It's kind of by religious people. They talk about this footsteps in the sand, yeah. And what it's about is, at the end of his life, this guy meets God, and he says, "But God, look, the worst times." You could see these 2 sets of footprints all walking through the sand, and then every now and then there's just 1 set of footprints. And he said, "Well, why did you desert me when I needed you most?" And God says to him, "That's when I carried you, son." It's very clever, right? But to me, it's like, that's me today, carrying my younger self all the way through life until I arrived at this spot here. But yeah, book, end of this year, should be finished. And there's a lot more. I mean, these guys will tell you the stories I've got are just insane. And yeah, there's some of them on my website. If you follow the link from the email invitation, you go to my website, there's some examples of chapters of my writing in there. And yeah, so please follow me on, if you go to my website, then you can find my Facebook, you can find my Instagram, you can find my probably Twitter as well, that kind of stuff. And then you will actually, by following me, you'll find out when the book's actually published and have the opportunity to buy it, yeah? Thank you very much.